Hey babes, my name's Nadia Sayre, and I'm reading chapter 6 today because I just noticed that chapter 6 never uploaded properly, which doesn't surprise me because I had a lot of mishaps reading that one the first time. As in, I tried to pause it, and then when I tried to start it again, the whole app shut down and it didn't save anything. I accidentally hit stop instead of pause, and I also kept fucking up as I read. So here's like effort number 8, and I am so sorry it took so long. But you know, there's chapter 7 and 8 available. This is just going to be a little off for you guys. I'm so sorry. I don't know how to fix it. Anyway, here's The Rebels, chapter 6. I guessed that it was mid-November and would be a cold winter. The wind cut through the scarf wrapped around my face like it was paper, but a scarf's better than nothing. The last 2 months had been filled with training, a lot of reading, and more bruises. Sonya and me had spent hours trying to remember our jujitsu moves in order to show the others what little we knew. Then there was all the time taking apart and putting guns back together and loading them. I found out the thing you inserted into the gun to load it was a magazine, not a clip like they call it on TV. Then there was the running. Oh man, the running. The paintballing was fun. We found paintball guns and gear with instructions and learned how to carry loaded weapons as teams. We'd split into 2 teams, different ones every time, and played. Definitely enjoyed that part, and we finally reached the point where no one was accidentally shot in the back and nobody shot themselves in the foot. Less fun was that it had taken nearly 2 weeks before my feet were healed enough for me to walk comfortably in shoes. Which, strangely enough, we found. The bunker was fully equipped with clothes to outfit 300 or 400 people. Well, men anyway. We found an entire room dedicated to pants, shirts, socks, jackets, hats, and boots, without a bra in sight. It felt weird wearing army clothing, but for this trip in the weather, we'd really bundled up and with extra clothing taken from the stores. The time spent training had changed all of us physically. Alex had healed, at least on the outside, and it turned out I was right. She was beautiful, lightly tanned, and her natural hair color of light brown hair was growing in, which gave her two-toned hair. Now, she'd always been slim, but now she added lean muscle. She was fast and had the best aim for long shots, so she'd chosen a version of a sniper rifle to carry with her on this trip. Jolly had grown. Not enough to pass his sister yet, but he was now taller than Sonya. He looked remarkably like Asilia, with the main difference being that he has his mother's black eyes and no blonde highlights, though his hair is lighter than his mother's. I didn't see much of his father in his looks, but I noticed it in his personality. Jolly is practical, funny, and a thinker, and smart. He also drove me nuts. Asilia, like Alex, had toned down. She wasn't comfortable with weapons and probably never would be, but she grew in confidence and maturity, and once she got over the fact that there's no internet and no phones. The kids complaining about that had nearly driven the rest of us insane. I didn't see much change in myself until I realized I tightened my belt 2 extra holes and that my shirts were becoming tight in the shoulders. I'd wandered through the bunker until I could find a mirror to see if the changes were actually visible. I studied myself in it. I have dirty blonde hair, though a romantic might call it honey blonde, with slightly scented, pale, some say cold, blue-gray eyes. No romantic terms for that. My features are blunt, my mouth too small, my nose too large. At best, I could be considered pretty, but only in ideal circumstances. Nothing new there. Physically, I'd toned up. All the soft bits appeared, and my shoulders were a bit bulkier with new muscle. I could run longer than I'd ever done in my life, and I didn't feel like I was about to die anymore, so that was a definite step up. Out of all of us, however, the biggest change was Sonya. Her comfortable belly was gone. She was still stocky, but all the fat covering the muscle disappeared. She's not the fastest, but she could keep going long after the rest of us were dying of exhaustion. Interestingly enough, she's also the best at sneaking around. Despite, or perhaps because of, her mediocre eyesight, she relied heavily on her other senses when running through the forest. When you can't see farther than 20 feet, it doesn't matter if your maximum visual range is 30. When we play hide and seek, she's the best at evasion and finding. It was really annoying how she did it. Natural scout, that one. Now, after 2 months of running about playing soldiers, we finally left the bunker. 3 days ago, there'd been smoke in the air down in the valley, and I couldn't rein Alex back any longer. She was gunning for revenge, and she was right. We needed to get started. I could easily continue telling myself that we weren't ready, but the truth is, we'd never be ready. Best to get out there now before I froze with fear and Alex went on a suicide run. Which is how we found ourselves driving out of the mountains on a freezing morning. Everything looked so different in the winter daylight, the bare trees interspersed with evergreens forming patches of brown that were so different from the first night. So far, we hadn't seen any signs of soldiers. That didn't stop us looking. Asilia drove with Alex next to her, navigating. Jolly and Sonya rode in the bed with me, binoculars pressed to their eyes above the scarves wrapping their faces. Jolly still hadn't forgiven me for manning the machine gun we'd mounted in the bed, instead of letting him do it. I told him he was 13. If I wouldn't let him drive, I sure as hell wouldn't let him near that gun. His mom would kill me. On the plus side, the truck's lights worked. Jolly had a theory about that after examining and comparing the bulbs from headlights and flashlights. It went something along the lines of, "The filaments are sturdier in the car's lights." I chalked it up to magic. From my point of view, it came out to be the same damn thing. Around us, the evergreens slowly gave way to leafless oaks and maples. The fallen leaves were piled into drifts by the merciless north wind. Years ago, we'd had another wind like this one. It resulted in the earth freezing solid and 3 inches of ice across the water trough. The sky was clear, now as then, and it looked like it should be a lovely spring day. If the temperature was the same, then we were looking at 13 below zero wind chills. Awesome! As the truck bounced over another pothole, I marveled at how smoothly Son and Jolly moved with it, recovering their balance. We were all leaner and stronger, but this would be our first test to see how disciplined we were. I sincerely hoped our haphazard training would be enough. Dying now would suck. We had a plan. Go for 2 weeks and check out the source of the burning. A quick jaunt around Salem, maybe. It really all depended on what we found as we went. If we did go into Salem, Jolly and Asilia would stay with the truck and the dogs would stay with them. I had every confidence that if shit hit the fan, Asilia could outdrive anybody. The girl still squirmed when she held a gun, but was more than happy to take sharp corners at the tops of cliffs at speeds that make professional drivers cringe and think twice. Sonya and me were the idiots who got to make sure Alex didn't get herself killed and take us with her. I hoped that if we could pull off a simple reconnaissance, maybe disturb the soldiers a little and not die, she'd calm down a bit. Enough that I didn't feel like I had to watch her every second of the day. We'd chosen our own weapons, though I didn't know how many more the others had stashed about their persons. The only thing I could see were the rifles Alex and I carried. Sonya had found out her eyesight was too poor without glasses to make using one a viable option. I know they carried more because I had 2 handguns, both Glocks. One of them the gun Walter Blake had given us. I also had 2 grenades in the utility pouches on the belt, along with various knives. I even had a knife taped to my thigh under my pants. Maybe I couldn't get to it easily, but anybody trying to take off my pants would be in for a nasty surprise. I also carried 4 spare magazines for the guns in the cargo pockets of my pants. I love pockets. So useful. Jolly was the first one to spot the source of the smoke, and he banged the top of the cab, telling Azealia to stop. He passed his binoculars up to me and pointed. The worst of the smoke dissipated in the wind, but a few wisps of it still drifted, thin banners caught by the breeze. What the hell? I stared. It was a town. "Alex!" I called, my voice muffled. Impatient, I pulled down the scarf. "Which town is that?" "Silverton," she said grimly. Fuck. The few buildings we could see at this distance were mere piles of rubble, with maybe one or two walls half standing. I fancied I could see some with rooftops left, but I wasn't sure. I hung onto the gun while I got my breath back. Why would they destroy a perfectly good town? Where were the people? I didn't see any bodies, but we'd have to go closer to know for certain. "We're going forward, right, Hope?" Alex's question had the ring of challenge. "Yeah, we're going," I growled. "Depending on what we find, we might actually go into town. We came here for bloody recon, didn't we? Doesn't really work if we bail at the first sign of information. Still, eyes open, people. Let's try to see them before they see us, okay?" I pulled my scarf back over my face as soon as I finished talking. Too damn cold to have exposed skin in this weather. I glared balefully at the clear blue sky. We took a slow route in, swinging wide around the town. Except that this is Oregon, and it's physically impossible to completely circle a town without going hours and miles out of the way, courtesy of hills, rivers, and infrequent roads. So we parked just outside of the town limits on Water Street. There were a few longer driveways that had sufficient cover to hide the truck. Couldn't leave it in the open anymore, not with a flipping mounted machine gun bolted to it. Why did I let them talk me into it? Me and Alex went first, checking out the house and grounds, but the coast was clear, no one living or dead, so the others joined us. Cinder, that old dog, stayed with the truck, snuggled up in the cab with a blanket in the window cracked for him. It surprised me how fast Alex and Azalea's scarves frosted over in the icy air. I pulled a glove off and felt my own scarf, wincing at the amount of ice coating it. Sonya chuckled. "On the bright side, nobody will recognize us bundled up like this." Jolly thought about that for a second. "Maybe we can get those masks like bikers wear. You know, the ones with skulls and stuff on them. That would be so wicked." "Maybe no," I said. "Give that kid an inch, he'll take a mile. Nobody goes anywhere alone. Check the buildings, see if we can find people. Street by street, slow and easy does it." I pointed at Alex and Jolly. "No running off." "Yes, Mother." Alex rolled her eyes. I glared and signaled, "I'm watching you." Her lips quirked upward briefly before she turned away. Our initial assessment was correct. Most of the buildings were reduced to piles of rubble. We walked in a loose group, checking streets as thoroughly as we knew how. Though I wasn't too worried, the place was a ghost town. It nearly killed me walking through this town. Silverton's so small compared to most other places, and it has only gotten smaller over the years. Like, it's a great place to buy a gift. But if you need something sensible, like socks, you have to drive 40 minutes to Salem. It was considered one of the most quaint and touristy towns to visit, and there'd been substantial renovations done to the town itself. Think facelift. The new developments on the east side of town, the ones we'd escaped through, weren't new. Not really. The original suburbs had gotten so old and worn that it'd been cheaper and more beneficial to the town to raze them and rebuild. But seeing it like this... Straight ahead of us, north on the 214, not a mile from where I now stood, was the garage I'd owned with Sonia's brothers, Will and Jake, both of whom were missing, along with the rest of Son's family and Will's wife. I'd been living and working out here for the last 5 years to save myself on gas bills in time. Just because I get crazy miles per gallon doesn't mean that the price of gasoline hasn't skyrocketed. I even walk to work most days. Not hard to do when you can walk across town in 20 minutes. And now those sons of bitching soldiers from some random country had killed my home. My hands tightened on the rifle I carried until the metal bit through my gloves. I took deep breaths until my heart slowed down. No time for emotions. Push them aside, bury them deep, until we get back to the bunker and it's safe to feel again. For now, pay attention to the streets, to where I'm going. Having no people makes it all a bit creepy, Sonya admitted. Yes, because walking through bombed buildings is perfectly normal, Alex jibed. Shut up in the peanut gallery and keep your eyes open, I barked, turning away before they saw me smile. I turned to walk backward a few steps and check out our rear. This was similar to sneaking through the bunker or the woods surrounding it with our paintball guns. Never knowing where my opponents were, afraid of getting shot with no warning. Only, no, 1,000,000 times more intense. I had to remind myself to keep breathing slowly to avoid hyperventilating. As I turned back to face the front, I caught a glimpse of one of the only roofs still standing on the east side of town. The library. The bookworm in me, who'd had to keep its head down for survival's sake, was thrilled the library still stood. I really wanted to go there and check out a book. An idea blossomed. Yeah, once we were reasonably sure no one was around to shoot us, we could go there. Maybe we could find some useful books at the library. Without the internet, finding good info was like stumbling around like the 3 blind mice. I smiled. I like the library. Normally, for people like us, it takes several days to go through the entire town. And I really didn't see how we could do it and still get to Salem and back before the weather turned nasty. However, we had one advantage: Sonya's pup. Obelix was still young, only 6 months old, but smart. Smarter than me at any rate. Add to that, Sonya's a regular dog whisperer, and she'd taught that little boy to keep his nose and ears sharp. He trotted proudly next to his human at the front of the group, black and white fur ruffling in the wind, one ear flopping with each step. As much as we watched our surroundings, we also kept an eye on Obelix. We cleared streets so much faster with the pup's help. As the sun settled farther into the western horizon and the shadows lengthened, we saw more of the same. Empty streets, hollow, blackened buildings, and skeletal trees clawing at the sky. Time to head back and set up camp. After 2 nights on the trail, we'd gotten the hang of it and had camp set up in less than 20 minutes. I'd just spread my sleeping quilt out on my mat when Alex approached me. I'd wondered if she would. "Will you take me to your aunt's house?" she asked, green eyes troubled. "I've been trying to remember, but I can't. Most of that day is just a blur." I thought that might be a mercy, but nodded. "We can head out now. It's not far." She gave a half-hearted, nervous smile. I peered at her face through the shadows cast by the fir trees. She looked decidedly pale, but I couldn't blame her. I'd always found it difficult visiting Mom's grave, especially the first time. I pulled Son aside to tell her where we were going. "I searched that area myself," Son murmured. "You won't have to worry about her freaking out over a hole in the ground. Somebody took care of the place." "Thanks." I exhaled, then beckoned for Alex to follow me. We walked quietly through the desolate town, watching the shadows lengthen and rubbing our hands together to keep the blood flowing. We passed the game shop that also carried skateboards and snowboards. They had a small ramp and bar for kids to practice on. The owner's dad was the main driving force behind the skate park that popped up over 20 years ago. The shop usually had a group of kids outside it practicing their moves. Across the street from the skate shop was a chain-link fence that always had wildflowers growing around it. The bachelor buttons were my favorite. The first left after that was a shop that specialized in restoring classic cars. We'd gotten some business from them over the years. Turn right at the intersection, next to the Norman Rockwell murals. The town was famous for murals. There was even a guided walking tour for them. Down a straight stretch of destroyed suburbia, we walked past the house that had had a golden doodle. I'd never known the dogs were so big. Alex walked silently by my side, eyes downcast, her thoughts turned inwards. We took another corner, and then we were at Aunt Rose's house. I stood at the end of the driveway, looking up at it. The last time we'd seen it had been in the pouring rain. We were full of fear, panic, and trepidation. So, obviously, some things hadn't changed. I still carried the gun Walter Blake had given us, though I like to think I had a slightly better idea of how to use it now. I glanced over at Alex and saw the memories chasing across her face. Fear, fury, guilt, and a sorrow so deep you could drown in it. I walked up the driveway, letting Alex follow as she wanted. I looked around, impressed so much of the house still stood. The eastern side had a bit of a hole in it, revealing both stories, but the west side, the street side, was in one piece. Alex caught up to me, staring with glassy eyes, looking like a sleepwalker. I let her take the lead as we came up to where the side fence used to be. When we entered the backyard, I sucked in a breath, eyes wide in astonishment. Not only was the yard not destroyed, but someone had also obviously taken time and care in turning it into a small memorial. The little wooden cross we'd left had been replaced by a small stone, painstakingly carved with Dylan's name and the words, "Beloved Son." Raised flower beds had been created around it, dormant now, but I thought that maybe, come spring, there would be life flourishing there. Across from it, a bird bath rested, though it was frozen right now. The apple tree was alive and unburned, so there would be blossoms gracing this tree next year, too. I looked around, wondering how so much had escaped destruction, and saw the answer. Auntie had a 12-foot-high hedge around the yard. Had being the operative word. The destruction of the town reduced the hedge to mere sticks stabbing blindly at the sky. The giant maple tree that now towered over the two-story house and shaded the backyard was little more than jagged wooden shards thrusting towards the sky. I walked to it, resting a hand on the trunk, and wondered if it was even still alive. Alex stumbled to the foot of the small grave and dropped to her knees, uncaring of the frozen earth as hard as concrete. I winced in sympathy for her knees. I could hear her speaking, her voice an indistinct murmur, and stayed back, loath to intrude on her time. Who knew when we'd make it back here again? Everything was just too weird. She stayed there on her knees, talking and crying until the sun wasn't even a memory, and the temperature had plummeted to well below freezing. Returning from another walk around the house and down the driveway, I went over and rested a hand on her shoulder. I'd long since pulled my scarf more firmly around my face and my hat over my ears, trying to keep warm. "It's time to go," I said. "If we stay any longer, the others will worry. And we'll freeze to death," I didn't say. Once Alex healed physically, we'd discovered that she was damn stubborn, even to her own detriment. I worried she'd fight me about leaving, maybe even try to spend the night, but to my surprise and relief, she offered no protest. I ended up having to pull her to her feet and sling her arm over my shoulder and wrap my arm around her free waist to support her. She was close to half frozen from staying in one place for over an hour. As we walked slowly away from the memorial, she didn't look back. "Thanks for letting me stay so long," she said quietly after we'd been walking for nearly 10 minutes. "I thought you'd have reeled me in a long time ago, especially since I've been such a bitch to you." "Well," I kept my voice mild, "it's not like you haven't been dealing with shit." Was this almost an apology? "Yeah, but everyone's had something to deal with. At least I know where my family is. You and the others don't." I mean, it kills me every day that my baby's gone, but I don't have to worry about what might be happening to him, if he's okay." Her voice broke and she stared forward. I carefully blanked my face. I don't think she'd react well to my astonishment. Was Alex actually expressing concern for others? For the last 2 months, she'd been so mired in her misery and anger, I'm not blaming her, she's completely justified, that she'd talked of nothing but getting revenge and what she would do to all the bastards. She'd been displaying so much aggression that me and Sonya had regularly walked away from training with bruises, black eyes, and split lips. And we never let Alex spar with the kids. Ever. She didn't walk into it with the plan to hurt anyone, but she worked herself hard, and the kids didn't have the stamina or skill to keep up with her. Plus, drawing blood is rather satisfying when you're hurting. Fighting Alex was good preparation for me and Sonya. Like Alex, any enemies we tangled with wouldn't let up or go easy on us. The rest of the walk back to the camp, we were silent. Alex hopefully contemplating a future, and me worrying about my family for the millionth time, and trying to figure out the next few days. I woke with a start, listening intently. I heard Alex shift on the far side of the camp and blew out a quiet breath. Nothing, it was nothing, just another nightmare. I took a few more deep breaths, feeling my heartbeat settle. Everyone had been dealing with nightmares of one thing or another, though we rarely spoke about it. What was there to say? We were scared shitless, but scared shitless while doing something was better than scared shitless and hiding in a hole. I honestly couldn't believe how much better I started feeling as soon as we actually left the bunker. The fear was still there, but was buried under all the stuff I had to remember to do and look for. I snorted quietly and readjusted on my sleeping mat. I'd thought so much about all the things to be scared of that I'd created an emotional immunity. By thinking about being scared, I'd actually bored myself out of it. Either that, or the human body could only manage so much terror before it got used to the sensation and proceeded to ignore it. Rolling onto my back, I caught a glimpse of the stars through the open tent door and sighed. No point in going back to sleep. Almost my turn on watch. Might as well start a bit early and give someone else the chance to catch up on this blessed thing called sleep. After breakfast, we packed everything up tightly and stowed it. Removing all the obvious signs of our campsite took a bit more time, but we were getting better at it. No reason to let the soldiers know that there were free people running around. We covered the ground on the other side of the creek, all the way to the Oregon Gardens and the hotel above them. The hotel looked in good condition, but too big for us to be comfortable or safe there. No way to see the enemy coming either. The burned wrecks of the houses didn't yield much by way of supplies. Made sense if they transported all the people here elsewhere that they'd take the food too. Even the grocery store had been haphazardly emptied. Alex didn't enter the Safeway. She stayed outside and kept watch. I couldn't blame her. Walking into that store after what happened there made my skin crawl, and the slightest sound made me start and reach for a weapon. Even though the bodies were gone, I kept imagining the soldiers lying there at the back between the refrigerated section and the produce. I did want to cry in the ice cream aisle. All that wasted deliciousness. "You still owe me a pint of Ben & Jerry's!" I bellowed to the empty air. "How do you know you won?" Sonya shouted back. "Have you seen yourself lately? You definitely lost more than 7 pounds. We never decided when I had to pay you. Bitch! Jerk!" I breathed a sigh of relief when we left the store behind, and Sonya visibly relaxed as we wandered down to the gas station. It was the only one left in town, used for buses and the few cars that locals didn't want to get rid of. Mostly classics. My favorite, the green '52 Ford pickup, could often be seen around town. I picked up a nozzle and hopefully squeezed the lever. Nothing. I sighed. Damn no electricity. In the end, it took us over an hour to get the gas station to cough up the goods. It took a bit of experimenting and a lot of damage to the pumps before we realized we could break into the underground tank quicker and easier. At least we can hide barrels of gas. I stood, hands on my hips, examining the mess we'd made of the pumps before we'd figured out the tank. No way to hide that shit. Anybody know a good place to stash the loot? I waved at the barrels standing around us. A friend of mine lived up on Water Street, Jolly volunteered. Their house is pretty well hidden by trees, and Fred and me had a small fort to one side. It's hard to spot. Plus, there's a lot of other properties along that road. I shrugged. Yeah, all right. Let's get this baby loaded. It took a mere 15 minutes to dismount the machine gun. Getting the barrels loaded took a lot more time. And panting, and groaning. Jolly came up with a rope system that allowed all of us to get the barrels up a short ramp and into the truck instead of only 3 of us breaking our backs. Quite ingenious of the little bugger. Sonya was our main brute force. Her forearms are the size of my upper arms, and they're solid, rock-hard muscle. There were times before when we'd be moving hay bales and Son would carry a 60-pound bale in each hand. Multiple times. She'd unload over half the hay alone. Without the fat to slow her down now and improved lung capacity, I actually had to force her and the others to take breaks. The aim was that we didn't break a sweat. In this weather, you sweat, you freeze. You freeze, you die. Simple as that. We got Acelia to make tea purloined from the grocery store for us regularly, which we had with the few bits of edibles we'd found there. It wasn't much, but having stale crackers and Twinkies beat the hell out of MREs. And all day long, we hauled barrels of gas away to create caches for future needs. On our 4th night out, I finally started sleeping better. Probably because I dropped with exhaustion every evening. I woke up feeling not cheerful, but content. We were moving forward, doing something. The others weren't so fresh in the morning, as they still hadn't adjusted to life without coffee. This morning, I at least had tea. I was on watch and I took my steaming mug to the edge of camp and stood just inside the trees. Though I'd seen sunrises before, and many of them would have been as beautiful as this one, I'd always been too busy to appreciate them. Work, bills, family drama, the idiocy of the government. All of these things have a way of cluttering minds, but now everything was so much more basic. Find supplies, shoot bad guys, don't die. Simple, right? I leaned against my tree and sipped my tea, watching the sky lighten. I love the color contrasts, the deep blue of the western sky fading to a light bluey green. Slowly, so slowly, watching the blues become invaded by pinks and reds and oranges, before finally seeing the sun peek over the mountains. Maybe my new appreciation is because we're dancing on the edge, I mused, breathing in the warm air over my mug. Have to enjoy today what we might not be alive to see tomorrow. I grinned. As I watched the sun crest the horizon and finish the last swallow of tea, I turned my face into the wind. Something's different. I sniffed the air, trying to place it. Half a minute later, it dawned on me. I was facing south. The wind had changed. So the cold snap was broken, but now the rains would move in. They always did with a southern wind. They usually did with a northern one, too. Oh, let's face it. This is Oregon. A 10% chance of rain literally means we'll be having rain. Thinking about rain means it'll rain, especially if you have plans. This is the Pacific Northwest. I shrugged. Not much I could do about the weather, and I had to pee. I scraped a few layers of loam from the base of a tree, dumped my tea bag in, and relieved myself. It was the work of a moment to scrape it all back over, hiding the evidence. Time to put introspection and philosophical thinking behind me. The day was calling. I hate you, Sonya mumbled blearily when I nudged her awake. The best part of having the last watch was waking everybody up. You're a natural. Nobody should be awake right now and happy about it. I ignored her and continued around the camp, using my boot liberally, depending on how hard they were to waken. This morning, Alex was especially difficult to get moving. I changed my mind, Hope. I openly laughed at Alex, with her two-toned hair hanging in front of her face as she scowled at me, propped up on her elbows. Last night I thought you were a nice person, but you're not. You're pure, undiluted evil. Go away. She flopped back into her sleeping bag, stubbornly burying her head in her arms. I thought for a moment, then leaned down. We're heading into Salem today, I whispered. I'm up! I'm up! She straightened, groaning as she got to her feet. I'm too young to feel this damn old. You and me both, Sonya muttered into her steaming mug of morning tea. I was a little disappointed that no one required more than a nudge to get going. I'm not squeamish about kicking a person when they're down. In fact, I figure that's the best time to do it. They're less able to kick back. And breakfast, like always, was whatever we had in a tin, and tea and crackers. We still had some of those. Well, thank you for joining me for this reread of Chapter 6. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, do please subscribe. I don't actually know where the link appears on here. Yeah, hope you stick around for the rest of the book. Have a great day.